A mysterious illness threatens the lives of 3 young women. The painful disease turns their immune systems against them and paralyzes them with excruciating pain. Panic rises as the outbreak spreads. Hundreds are stricken and dozens die. As doctors treat the afflicted, public health officials race to find the cause of a new disease before it can claim more lives. At a health club in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Bonnie Bishop started her daily workout with a warm-up in the pool. At 39, Bonnie was in top physical condition. As a semi-professional tennis player, she worked out regularly and hard. But lately, she felt tired. Her muscles were sore. She hoped swimming would help loosen her up. Halfway across the pool, something went wrong. A searing pain shot through her entire body. She seized in agony, unable to swim. She barely made it to the side of the pool. Bonnie was terrified. Nothing like this had ever happened to her before. 24 hours later, the pain had still not subsided. Bonnie was a young woman and in peak condition. Yet any movement, even walking, was excruciating. Her doctor was perplexed. Although she was running a low-grade fever, the exam showed nothing that would explain her symptoms. Bonnie's doctor ordered a complete blood workup to look for signs of infection. At the hospital lab, Bonnie's blood showed an abnormally high number of eosinophils, a type of white blood cell. The condition is called eosinophilia. Eosinophils are a part of the body's immune system. When certain infections are present, the cells multiply to fight it off. A normal eosinophil count ranges between 0 and 500 cells per cubic millimeter of blood. Bonnie's eosinophil count was over 6,000. A count this high could mean cancer. Bonnie's parents were devastated. Murray and Jackie Bishop were very close to their daughter. They took pride in her athletic abilities.
She was doing any activity that was outdoors, bicycle riding, sailboarding. That was the kind of girl she was, kind of a lifestyle she led. Very, very active.
On October 10th, Bonnie was admitted to St. Vincent Hospital in Santa Fe, New Mexico. There, she was examined by Dr. William Blevins, an oncologist. As a cancer specialist, Blevins empathizes with his patients as they suffer through the devastating effects of the disease.
The organs of the body are reacting to some inflammatory process. So it feels like an inflammation, like a toothache all over your body that just is the worst you've ever had. and things aren't functioning well. You're getting weaker and your strength is going away.
Bonnie underwent a battery of tests to find out what was causing the eosinophilia. It was difficult for Jackie Bishop to see her daughter in such pain.
They tested her liver, they x-rayed her, they took her blood. They just did everything because nobody could figure out what was wrong with her, and she was just getting sicker and sicker.
Doctors had done all they could to rule out other possible causes of eosinophilia. Bonnie had been tested for everything from allergies and asthma to parasites. Each test had come back negative.
Well, I need to talk to you a little bit about what's going on. We don't have a diagnosis yet even after.
Doctors feared Bonnie had leukemia, cancer of the blood. For Murray Bishop, it was a terrifying prospect.
I knew she was suffering, but when he said leukemia, that scared the heck out of me because I lost my best friend and co-worker with leukemia.
A team of specialists was called in to consult on Bonnie's case. After 72 hours in the hospital, her condition had become critical.
Her lungs were filling up with fluid. She couldn't breathe very well. So she was short of breath and hungry for air, and her body was swelling, and her abdomen was getting swollen with fluid, and her liver wasn't working.
Bonnie couldn't breathe. The swelling had constricted her airway. Doctors put her on straight oxygen, but they were running out of time. They had to get rid of the fluid building up inside Bonnie's body. The only way to relieve the pressure was to operate. Surgeons hoped they would also find the cause of Bonnie's mysterious condition.
Yeah, the toxicology is still looking at it.
If she did have cancer, perhaps they would find tumors the x-rays had missed. It was a risky procedure. Bonnie was so weak, doctors warned she might not survive the surgery. Over the next 2 hours, surgeons drained over a gallon of fluid from Bonnie Bishop's body.
Just squeeze it here. He's under.
There were no visible tumors.
Your frozen section. Yeah.
Surgeons also took samples from her bone marrow, liver, stomach, intestines, and ovaries. They would be biopsied in the lab later.
All right.
For Murray and Jackie Bishop, the wait continued. Doctors needed lab results before they could determine what was threatening their daughter's life. A pathologist examined the biopsies. He found no evidence of leukemia. But if Bonnie Bishop did not have cancer, what was causing her elevated white blood cell count? In tissue biopsies, the pathologist could see the eosinophils as purple dots. They had now invaded Bonnie's muscles and organs. But until doctors could figure out what was causing her illness, they could only treat the symptoms. Dr. Blevins prescribed high doses of prednisone, a powerful steroid used to reduce inflammation and swelling. He hoped it would relieve Bonnie's muscle pain and lower her eosinophil count.
Take a deep breath. Okay, in and out. Okay, yeah, you move there pretty good. You're gonna need the oxygen for, a while. I won't touch your stomach just very lightly. It's gonna take.
Still, there was no guarantee the steroids would work. Blevins felt it was important to prepare his patient for the worst.
Bonnie was just so seriously ill. I wasn't sure she would respond, and I let her know that, you know, you potentially you're going to lose your life. And it's hard to tell that to people.
If she didn't respond to the steroids, she would need another surgery, a surgery she was too weak to survive. Blevins' patient was dying, and he still had no answers. At this point, he was willing to consider anything, even a long shot. What if Bonnie's illness was caused by something in her environment?
I felt it was, the possibility is some exposure she had outside, just in her regular life, either something that she was taking or something that she had been exposed to.
He asked Jackie Bishop to bring in any medications her daughter had been taking. She also collected bottles of nutritional supplements she found in the medicine cabinet. The next day, she brought everything to Dr. Blevins.
Let's take a look at that. So just multiple vitamins.
Yeah, she basically wasn't taking
Not
very
that-
much.
Yeah.
Bonnie had been taking multivitamins and a dietary supplement called L-tryptophan.
Yes, she went to a sleep clinic and they
Yeah.
recommended that.
Yeah, I know it's been taken for that. Well, I'm not
In health food markets, L-tryptophan was sold as a natural sleep aid.
She has been taking this.
It is derived from protein sources such as fish, meats, and dairy products.
Multiple vitamins. I was unsure if that was the cause. It's essential amino acid that should not be harmful to our system. It's part of our system, part of our proteins and the amino acids, so we're built with that.
The supplement had been available over the counter for a decade.
Well, thanks for bringing
No
it in.
serious side effects had ever been reported. It wasn't a likely culprit, and neither were the vitamins. Blevins was still at a loss. In nearby Los Alamos, another case would add to the mystery.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mayer.
43-year-old Kathy Lorio told her doctor she was suffering from terrible muscle pain. Blood tests revealed that Lorio's eosinophil count was off the charts. Fortunately, Kathy's physician had consulted on Bonnie Bishop's case in Santa Fe. He recognized the symptoms.
My first symptom was the really rapid heartbeat in the middle of the night. My heart was just slamming against my rib cage, and I had no idea. It would just wake me up all of a sudden in the middle of the night. And at the same time, I was having problems with my extremities, the muscles in my extremities.
Nurse, would you get a blood sample first, please?
By the time she went to the doctor, her muscle and joint pain was unbearable.
My symptoms just got worse and worse, and the pain in my extremities went upward from my ankles up to the top of my head. What was a dull ache became a burning sensation. It was like having acid under my skin. I couldn't sleep at all. I think I went at least 3 weeks without sleeping 5 minutes.
Just like Bonnie Bishop, Kathy Lorio had taken L-tryptophan to alleviate her insomnia. Had both women unknowingly swallowed a dangerous substance? If so, they were not alone.
I got a call from the Women's Health Center, and it was from the doctor there who wanted to know about a woman who had a high eosinophil count and had muscle aches. And I asked, please ask this woman right away, is she taking L-tryptophan? And sure enough, the patient was taking tryptophan. And we had 3 cases.
As Bonnie Bishop got worse and the case list grew longer, Blevins reached a frightening conclusion. They were dealing with an outbreak. Blevins contacted the New Mexico Health Department. Dr. Millicent Eidson was the state environmental epidemiologist. She was briefed by Dr. Ron Voorhees.
There were 3 physicians who saw middle-aged women, previously healthy, And they were seen because they had incapacitating myalgias, just muscle pain so bad they couldn't move. They all said they had taken a dietary supplement, L-tryptophan, which is over the counter. It's not prescription. I've recommended it for years as a sleeping aid because it's non-narcotic, it's not habit-forming.
If a common over-the-counter dietary supplement was to blame, hundreds of thousands of people could be affected. Dr. Eitzen was concerned. She was facing one of the most dangerous epidemic scenarios possible.
Most outbreaks that health departments deal with are foodborne type outbreaks like salmonella or E. coli from contaminated food. And those are a lot easier because you have a recognized illness. But this outbreak appeared to be a brand new disease.
The mysterious symptoms only made the health department's job more difficult.
There wasn't any lab tests that we could do to confirm what was causing the disease. And so nothing really in common immediately among these patients. So that made it much more of a medical mystery to investigate. We began to look for more cases.
Dr. Eitzen alerted clinics, hospitals, and other state health departments. She needed to know if the disease was spreading, and if so, how fast. Even as health officials struggled to understand what they were dealing with, Bonnie Bishop's condition spiraled downward. Her doctors had no idea that their patient, and the two women like her, were just the beginning of a public health nightmare. In October 1989, a New Mexico woman nearly drowned when her body was gripped by pain and paralysis. As her doctors fought to keep her alive, the cause of her illness eluded them. Within days, 2 more women had fallen ill. They developed the same crippling symptoms. Now facing a potential outbreak, New Mexico health officials issued an alert to other state health departments. They needed to know how many cases they were dealing with. News of the mysterious illness caught the attention of Tamar Stieber, a health reporter for the Albuquerque Journal.
Somebody mentioned that they knew a woman who had this very weird flu, different kind of symptoms, pretty severe, but it just wasn't your normal flu. And he also mentioned that she happened to be taking the stuff, L-tryptophan, and she was wondering if maybe there was a connection.
Stieber's research led her to Dr. William Blevins.
I told her what I knew. I thought it was very important that it be related, that people know that L-tryptophan could potentially cause a serious, life-threatening illness.
Stieber was convinced she had stumbled on an urban horror story, an epidemic that strikes young women in the prime of their lives.
The list of symptoms was so extensive and so off the wall. They all had these astronomically high white blood cell counts. That's very unusual. I knew I had a story.
On November 7th, 3 weeks after Bonnie Bishop was admitted to the hospital, the story ran in the Albuquerque Journal. That same day, Judy Paulson and her husband were traveling from Albuquerque to the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. Judy was suffering from severe muscle pain. Her doctors could not diagnose her symptoms. She hoped the specialists at the Mayo Clinic could help her. On the plane, Stieber's article caught Judy's attention.
The words that jumped out at me were rare blood disorder and L-tryptophan. As I read on, I realized that the 3 New Mexico women that they had been interviewing had all the same symptoms that I did, and the only common thread with those 3 people was the L-tryptophan. And so I thought, I'm the 4th.
And the EMS.
Judy contacted Tamar Stieber the minute she landed. She told the reporter she had taken L-tryptophan 3 times a day for months.
I wanted her to know that I really felt she was onto something. I was relieved to think maybe there was finally an answer for what was wrong with me, because all the physicians had been saying, we just don't know, it could be this, could be that.
Judy Paulson was not alone. Throughout the state, people responded to Stieber's front-page article. Hundreds of calls poured into the health department. 9 women reported identical symptoms to the 3 known cases, bringing the total to 12. There were cases all over the state. The disease was apparently spreading. Dr. Millicent Eidson and the New Mexico Health Department stepped up their investigation.
That made us realize that this really could be a large outbreak, that we really were seeing just the tip of maybe a very large iceberg. And it made us motivated to work even harder and faster on the outbreak, because if it was L-tryptophan or due to any other unknown cause, it would be really important to find out quickly what it was in order to protect public health.
Despite their suspicions about L-tryptophan, Dr. Eidson needed to find proof of the source of the outbreak.
It was really important to have a rigorous epidemiologic study, because this was a new disease that we didn't know how widespread it was. This product was used worldwide and could have a lot of implications in regards to tens of thousands of people potentially being exposed.
The potential for a global epidemic affecting women was terrifying. Eidson alerted the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta. At the CDC's National Center for Environmental Health, Dr. Ed Kilborn took charge of the case.
When we were told about the outbreak, we were told about a possible L-tryptophan link, but a clinical observation in a few cases is not the same thing as a real epidemiologic study, and we needed those to be done. Henry, need a word. Just got the call on the eosinophilia cases in New Mexico. Dr. Eidson, they're trying to sort out duplications right now, get an exact case count. It's hit the papers out there. We're starting to hear about cases, perhaps.
Before they could make any decisions about the cause of the outbreak, the CDC had to have proof. They needed hard data linking the victims to L-tryptophan. The CDC teamed up with Eidson's staff in New Mexico to design a case control study. The in-depth analysis compared sick patients to a control group of healthy people. The investigators hoped to find answers in their differences.
And so what we did is send teams out to hospital laboratories. We literally looked through tens of thousands of records looking for high eosinophil counts.
Any patient record with an eosinophil count over 2,000 in the past 6 months was reviewed. Patients with high eosinophil levels, possibly caused by allergies or parasites, were eliminated from the study. In all, it took a massive statewide effort to isolate just 11 cases of eosinophilia. Next, health officials went door to door, searching patients' neighborhoods. They needed to find women of similar ages who had not become ill. These women would serve as the control group for the study.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm with the State Health Department.
These people were similar to the ill people in the same kind of housing and socioeconomic status and lifestyles, but they were well.
Oh, that's all right. My name's Irene. I'm one of the nurses that works at the health department. What's nice to meet you?
And we give the same questions to the ill people and then to their well neighbors.
What's your date of birth? Yes. Do you take any calcium supplements? Yes. Any lecithin?
And then we compare the answers and see, are there any differences that may account for why the people became ill.
Do you take brewers?
It was a difficult and painstaking process. It would take several days to gather all the information and analyze the results. In Atlanta, Dr. Kilborn issued a CDC alert to health departments all over the country. They needed more data to reveal whether the cases in New Mexico were isolated or whether they were facing a national epidemic. They also had to figure out why the disease only appeared to affect women. But as federal and state health officials fought the mysterious outbreak, more people in New Mexico were becoming seriously ill.
What do you got?
As a mysterious illness swept across New Mexico, nearly a dozen young women were stricken. All of them suffered the painful symptoms of eosinophilia, a rare blood disorder that turns the victim's own immune system against itself.
What'd you get on weight? Got Lasix. Just Lasix?
1, 2, 3!
Fight! Get the side. Got that epinephrine. 1 milligram. IV push now.
No response on the pupil.
Arterial blood gas right now.
As the disease progresses, the victim's nervous systems shut down. In extreme cases, patients can go into cardiac arrest. All of the victims had taken L-tryptophan. The amino acid was a popular natural remedy for insomnia, PMS, and depression. Doctors wondered how a common over-the-counter supplement could suddenly cause so many women to become sick. State health officials conducted studies to determine whether L-tryptophan was responsible for the outbreak. At the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Dr. Ed Kilborn investigated the extent of the epidemic. He issued a nationwide CDC alert on EpiNet, a public health database. The response confirmed his worst fears.
We started to find there were numerous reports in other cases, and rather rapidly it became clear that this was a nationwide problem.
As the number of new cases grew, doctors made a surprising discovery. In addition to women, men were now contracting the disease. Hundreds of cases now threatened the nation's health. Albuquerque Journal health reporter Tamar Stieber, who first broke the story, continued to cover the outbreak.
I started getting information about people in other states. And then it started to spread across the country. It still hadn't hit me yet what exactly I was dealing with. It was a story. I was taking it day by day, but every day it was just expanding exponentially.
From health investigators, Stieber learned that there were also multiple cases in Minnesota. A few days after the EpiNet alert went out, Dr. Ed Belanger of the Minnesota Department of Health was dealing with 4 cases of eosinophilia in his state.
It was us against this new mystery disease, and we desperately needed to find what was causing it, because until we knew what was causing it, people were still at risk for developing it.
Like their counterparts in New Mexico, Minnesota epidemiologists believed there was an association between L-tryptophan and the sick patients. But without scientific proof, they couldn't support their theory.
If this was L-tryptophan, we really needed to get the evidence identified as quickly as possible so that it could be taken off the market. Because the longer we delayed, the more people would be out there buying this at grocery stores and at health food stores, and more people would be getting sick.
For both New Mexico and Minnesota health officials, the next step depended on the results of the studies. In Santa Fe, the health department worked round the clock to complete its study in just 4 days. Dr. Millicent Eidson tabulated the results on Sunday evening, November 12th.
What we found is that all of the ill people had taken L-tryptophan prior to their illness, whereas of the 22 well people, only 2 of them had taken L-tryptophan in the same time period. This was a highly statistically significant difference. This wasn't due to just some kind of chance.
On Monday morning, the New Mexico Health Department issued a public health order prohibiting the sale of L-tryptophan. It was taken off store shelves. 4 days later, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration banned the sale and display of L-tryptophan all over the country. They issued a nationwide recall of the supplement and advised anyone who had used it to see their doctors. With the ban in place, officials hoped they had effectively stopped the spread of the illness. This was small consolation to the patients who were still fighting for their lives. At St. Vincent's Hospital, Bonnie Bishop was getting worse. She had been the first to fall victim to the strange new disease. Her doctor, oncologist William Blevins, began to lose hope.
Well, I felt Bonnie potentially could lose her life from this disease, and whatever was causing it, this eosinophilia. People can continue to deteriorate and die from this. And in Bonnie's case, she was on the verge.
Bonnie's parents stayed by her side. They had to face the possibility that they might lose their daughter.
I just thought it was impossible for anybody that was as strong as she was to die at her age and her fantastic physical condition. I just thought it was impossible for her to die. I really got scared.
As patients around the country struggled for their lives, the CDC kept doctors updated. Together, they would fight this new disease.
The physicians who were taking care of this illness knew they had something new, and they had no literature or scientific medical basis to guide them in the therapy of these patients. So to the extent we heard about therapeutic trials in individual patients, at that time, that was the most valuable and important information that we could be disseminating.
Health officials also enlisted the help of America's leading eosinophilia specialist, Dr. Gerald Gleich at the Mayo Clinic Foundation.
This was enough to strike panic into the hearts of the afflicted individuals because the docs don't know and there's no body of information. My phone was ringing off the hook. Physicians were calling from all over the country. Their wives, their daughters, their friends were afflicted. Could I help them with information? Hello? I don't recall getting this kind of history before. Now, I think one additional thing, we want to know what happens, so it'll be important to get blood samples, to do blood counts, and to get some blood samples.
There was little information to give them, and the lack of knowledge was taking its toll.
I need a blood gas right now, and the central line. Hang epinephrine 2 milligram, 300 joules.
Place it, Haddle. Clear.
On November 16, 1989, the mysterious new disease claimed its first victim. How many more would die before they could find the cause of the outbreak? In the fall of 1989, a debilitating disease struck hundreds of people throughout the United States. Health officials determined the epidemic was caused by L-tryptophan, an over-the-counter dietary supplement commonly used as a sleep aid. The FDA banned its sale, but doctors still struggled to treat the victims. One had already succumbed. Others were near death.
We've seen such a dramatic increase.
Weeks after the outbreak began, epidemiologist Ed Belanger had more questions than answers. The research team at the Minnesota Department of Health would have to dig deeper.
Individuals who are, it seems clear that given the popularity of tryptophan, that not everybody who consumes tryptophan is developing this syndrome, and yet at the moment we don't really have any idea how common tryptophan use is or what proportion of users are actually becoming sick. This investigation was like peeling the layers of an onion. With every layer you get one little answer and then you get 10 new questions to look at. And as you go deeper into the onion, you discover more and more surprises that you never anticipated when this all began.
Researchers contacted each of the known victims to learn what brand of L-tryptophan they had been taking.
We wanted to get actual bottles that people were taking before they became sick so that we could initiate a process of tracing them back to find out more about how they were manufactured and by who.
Officials asked victims to send all of their L-tryptophan to the Minnesota State Health Department.
Now this one's really important because it's the only bottle that they said they've ever used.
The next step in the investigation was to try and find out more about how L-tryptophan was manufactured. Where did it come from? Who made it? How was it made? We didn't know any of that. We were on a very steep learning curve in a very short time.
From labels, investigators learned that the supplements had been bottled by different companies nationwide. There was no way to tell where the amino acid had been manufactured.
It turns out to be an extraordinarily complex network of procedures from the time tryptophan is initially manufactured until the time it ends up on the shelf at a drugstore or a chain store.
In all, they collected 60 different brands of L-tryptophan. They then narrowed their search to the 12 brands used by the victims. All 12 used raw tryptophan from the same source.
We were seeing that there was a particular brand that seemed to be associated with the tryptophan consumed by cases. We were ultimately able to trace that brand back and find out that all of that tryptophan was manufactured by a single company in Japan.
In Washington, D.C., the Minnesota Health Department held a meeting with executives of the Japanese company that produced the L-tryptophan. The doctors showed their findings to the executives. They agreed to cooperate fully. The company provided health officials with documents detailing their manufacturing methods. Because L-tryptophan is not considered a drug, it is unregulated by Japanese or American authorities. To produce tryptophan, a bacteria is grown in a fermentation broth. Through a series of chemical reactions, the bacteria produces raw tryptophan. This is then filtered, purified, and turned into powder form. Company records indicated they had recently altered their process.
To increase the yield and get more product, they made some genetic changes to this bacteria. They tinkered with some of the genes.
It was like science fiction, only real.
Thank you.
Now Boulanger needed to know whether the changes had contaminated a batch of L-tryptophan. He enlisted the help of Dr. Arthur Maeno at the Mayo Clinic lab. Dr. Maeno used a process called high-performance liquid chromatography. HPLC creates a chemical fingerprint of each suspicious sample of L-tryptophan. First, the L-tryptophan was dissolved in purified water. The solution was then injected into a pressure chamber to separate its chemical components. If there was a contaminant present, the key to finding it and to stopping the outbreak was contained in this solution. The results were displayed as a series of peaks. Each peak represented a different trace element. Chromatography had isolated nearly 60 substances other than tryptophan in the samples. Any one of these could be the contaminant that caused the eosinophilia. To isolate the exact substance, Dr. Maeno worked backwards. He tested samples of L-tryptophan that did not make people sick. He then compared the two sets of results. One peak was present only in the L-tryptophan taken by sick patients. He designated it peak E for eosinophilia. Dr. Maeno shared his results with Dr. Gleich. They agreed that peak E could be the contaminant that had caused the disease. Now they had to determine its chemical makeup. The doctors felt they were close to identifying the cause of the disease, but they also knew they were a long way from finding a cure. In New Mexico, victims had developed troubling new symptoms.
I was working, thinking things were getting better and feeling that they were physically, until I realized that I wasn't able any longer to do my job. I knew that I would have to stop working at that point.
Judy Paulson saw a neurologist when she couldn't concentrate long enough to perform her job. MRI scans showed the disease had created several lesions in her brain. This was causing her cognitive difficulties. Medical science had no treatment to offer Judy.
It was very frightening for me because I had been working for so many years doing the same thing and always being a very active individual and having many, many things on my plate at once. Suddenly I was confronted with going home and sitting and waiting to get better.
The disease persisted long after the victims had stopped taking L-tryptophan. As victims fought for their lives, scientists raced to learn the cause of a strange new disease. In late 1989, health officials closed in on a killer. Hundreds of cases of a strange new disease had been reported nationwide. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention named the new disease eosinophilia myalgia syndrome, or EMS. EMS attacks the immune system of its victims, turning the body against itself.
Now, so far, officials at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control know of 1,200 cases of the new illness. 12 people have died and many are very sick. Officials believe they are closing in on the cause.
An over-the-counter dietary supplement called L-tryptophan was linked to the epidemic. By the end of November, EMS had claimed the lives of 4 people. Experts feared the death toll would rise. In Santa Fe, New Mexico, Bonnie Bishop began her slow recovery from the debilitating disease. After 2 weeks on prednisone, a powerful steroid, she had gradually regained some strength. But the EMS had destroyed so much muscle tissue, the former triathlete could barely walk. Murray Bishop was moved by his daughter's determination.
The doctor gave her permission to walk for the first time in the hospital. He said, "You can walk around the nurses' station once and then come back." She walked around 3 times and then got up an hour and a half later and wanted to do it again.
At the Mayo Clinic, scientists isolated an impurity in the L-tryptophan that made people sick. For the time being, the substance was known only as peak E, its designation on their charts. A sample of the impurity was sent to the CDC's Division of Environmental Health. Dr. Robert Hill, a research chemist, had found the same peak in samples of L-tryptophan that he had tested. Isolating the chemical was only the first step. Now Hill had to identify the molecular components of the mysterious compound. He used a mass spectrometer to determine its mass. His results gave him the chemical makeup of the impurity, but they didn't prove it caused EMS. Next, Hill and his team worked closely with National Institute of Health scientists who tried to replicate the disease in laboratory animals. None of the animals contracted the disease. While this did not rule out peak E as the cause of EMS in humans, researchers may never conclusively prove it made so many people sick. To this day, the cause remains unknown.
If we don't know how it happened or why it happened, that same thing could pop up again, or something similar to that could happen again somewhere.
The CDC identified 1,500 cases of EMS. 37 people had died. The rest were in for a long and painful recovery. Without scientific proof of the exact cause of EMS, medical officials worry the disease may appear again.
Until we really know, until we can pinpoint with certainty which contaminants are the responsible ones, it's highly probable that this disease will occur again. And the scenario that we've gone through will be duplicated again at some time in the future.
The outbreak has frightening implications for nutritional supplement users.
The EMS example is a gigantic red flag for taking food supplements. The food supplements don't go through any testing. The patients that took the tryptophan ended up having their lives ruined. Many of them died.
Because the contaminant was never identified, over-the-counter tryptophan remains banned in the US. In Europe, where supplements are regulated and the manufacturing process is controlled, tryptophan is still available. It has been used for years without incident. Many patients who survived the EMS outbreak continue to suffer its effects. After her third MRI, Judy Paulson learned that the lesions in her brain had stopped growing. But 13 years later, she still struggles to regain the life she once had.
I'm certainly not as active as I once was, and stress just puts me over the edge. The slightest amount of stress generally I can't deal with at all. It's one thing at a time that I have to concentrate on.
For Kathy Lorio, recovery has been slow, but she remains optimistic.
After about a year, I was able to go back to work, and I think I've done fairly well. I keep trying. I certainly appreciate life a lot more now, and I'm very grateful to be doing as well as I'm doing.
For Bonnie Bishop, returning home after a month in the hospital was not the end of her battle with EMS.
Nobody gave up, and of course, last one that would give up would be her, because that's the way she is.
It took years, but Bonnie finally got her life back.
I'm a real fighter, and so that's how I approached this situation. I think having been an athlete probably prepared me well for it, because I can work through pain and I can see slow progress and not be discouraged as long as I see some progress.
A year after being released from the hospital, Bonnie returned to work as a graphic designer. The harrowing experience left her with a new perspective.
I'm very thankful for all the wonderful things that I've experienced since I was supposed to succumb. And I'm glad to have had those years.
For Bonnie Bishop and hundreds of other EMS survivors, every day is another victory over the disease that nearly took their lives.